Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
He is Dr. Crow, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, joining us here this morning for another edition of Inside the Training Room. And Austin, I want to go back to something I tweeted at you. First of all, good morning, by the way, buddy. Should say that. So
beautiful day.
Beautiful day. I want to go back to something I was tweeting at you with the draft, and you responded to it too. But Peyton Wilson, he was a linebacker, fell in the draft, and he was a popular name to be attached as a possible Packer pick over there. But he had been dealing with some injuries, shoulders and knees and such, and then it was reported that one of his knees doesn't even have an ACL. First of all, how is that, like, I mean, this is going to sound like a dumb question, and I apologize, but, like, so we talk a lot about ACL repairs, but is there a certain point where it's just better for somebody to maybe not have an ACL, where is it so damaged and such where it's like you just can't do anything about it?
I mean, there's always reconstructive options. And like I, responded to your tweet, I mean, there are athletes that have been able to participate without an ACL. So, I mean, the ACL is we've talked about it a bunch, but just a super quick anatomy lesson. It's one of the major ligaments in the knee. It predominantly prevents anterior translation and, even more importantly, rotation of the knee. So when people do cutting, jumping, pivoting sports, usually you need an ACL for the knee to be stable. So when you plant your leg and you boost up and jump or twist, forces go through, your upper body down through the leg to your foot, which is planted on the ground. Well, if there's no ACL, generally the knee will shift and rotate in a way it's not supposed to, which for a lot of people is painful and really unstable and can unfortunately cause damage. That's the main reason that we reconstruct ACLs, in order to get people back to be able to run, jump, etc. And so some people are able to, at a certain level, participate without an ACL. Now, why are some able to do it more than others? It has to probably do with strength, control of the leg. There's a lot of things that go into it, but a vast majority of people who have an ACL tear ultimately get it on. Now, he's in the camp where he had, I believe, at least 2 previous reconstructions, and it seems like it tore again. I can tell you there's basically no reason we wouldn't consider going back again. Sometimes we have to go back in and fill the old tunnels with bone graft and do what's called a staged reconstruction, where we'll fill the tunnels and kind of hit a reset button to restart the reconstruction, if you will. But it's possible the athlete is saying, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's a personal decision, obviously. And if he's able to run and cut and jump on it, more power to him. Certainly the risk of another injury, so either cartilage or meniscal or another ligament, is higher with that. There's studies have shown that. So it's, I would say, against medical advice, probably. I'm sure some surgeon out there is telling them, hey, you should probably consider reconstructing this again. But someone who's been through it twice, I'm sure they're not licking their chops to do it a third time, so that's probably coming into play as well.
So is it, and again, I apologize, this sounds kind of dumb, like if you remove the ACL, I don't know if that's the proper way to say it, is that a quicker recovery time for a person, or is it about the same?
Well, I mean, if you just take it out of there, there's no surgery and there's no reason to hold someone back, per se. So, yeah, that's going to be a really fast recovery. But now you're deficient a leg. It's like a table. If you break a leg, is it faster to just cut the leg off and say, look, now you have a 3-legged table? Yeah, it is. But if you take the time to reconstruct the leg and now you have a 4-legged table, it's more stable. That's the same concept, is that if you just go in there and leave the ACL, and you don't even have to remove it. If it's torn, you just let it be. You don't have to go in and remove it. It just is torn and your body will dissolve it. So there really is no recovery per se from that. But again, the real concern, of course, is going to be what does it look like stability-wise. And if he's able to play, because I think I'd read he actually played his last season with that ACL deficient. So, I guess it says that he's able to do it. Probably one of the more well-known cases was Hines Ward. He played his whole NFL career without an ACL in one of his knees.
Yeah.
And so that is the exception, not the rule. Like I tweeted at you. There are people who can do it. I unfortunately see athletes who try to do it or have an injury and don't get it assessed right away, come back a couple months later and have another bigger injury, and you look back and say, well, your first injury was a torn ACL. Now you've done X, Y, or Z as well. So the data on it's pretty convincing that a vast majority of people should consider reconstruction for the protective reasons and the ability to get back to cutting, pivoting activity.
So didn't John Elway have something like that too, where he didn't have an ACL, or maybe that was a cartilage one? I can't remember off the top of my head over there too, but something.
I'm trying to remember with Elway. Yeah, I do. I think you're right on. I can't remember exactly with Elway. He might have had something going on too. Yeah.
So I mean, is it possible So the Hines Ward one kind of makes me shocked because he played wide receiver, and you talk about the pivoting and the jumping and all that, and the guy finished with over 10,000 receiving yards in his career. I mean, is it possible where he's running and all of a sudden just could collapse because there's no stability in that knee if somebody were like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, so if people without an ACL, I mean, sometimes they'll injure it, they'll come in, see us in clinic, we get an MRI. And then there'll be a little bit of a delay till surgery. And sometimes I'll talk to them like, man, my knee's starting to feel better. And it's like, yeah, with daily walking and that stuff, most people can function without an ACL with daily activities. But yes, you try play a receiver in the NFL. It is very surprising he was able to do that. But again, he obviously was. But then when you look at the list of players who did have reconstructions, it's much bigger. But there are people out there who feel like you can rehab and kind of get some of these people through. It would definitely be a gamble, no question about it. If you try to do it and you had another injury and then you damage the cartilage, well, then we're in like a Bakhtiari situation, right? Where it's like, well, now the knee's in trouble and there's not those are very difficult situations to salvage. So, yeah, I mean, it's if you had a crystal ball and you knew that maybe 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 people could be stable and you'd let those people go, that'd be awesome. The problem is we just don't have the ability to predict that. So that's where you're trying to play a guessing game, really.
Would it, and again, I apologize to sound stupid. Does a brace, if a guy played with a brace on his knee, does that help any with the stability at all?
I mean, there are ACL braces, absolutely. So we call them, derotational braces or functional derotational braces. So I mean, those exist. I would say if they provided all the stability needed, ACL reconstruction surgery wouldn't exist. So, I mean, we tried. I mean, I've had athletes try play seasons or part of seasons with them on, and I can tell you they don't work perfect. That's for sure. So, I mean, do they impart a little additional stability? Probably. And there's different camps on bracing. Now, some injuries, like MCLs, for example, that's a side-to-side, like almost like a hinge ligament. Those braces work very well to stabilize. So medial and lateral-sided injuries, those work well. But the problem is the ACL and to a lesser extent the PCL are more rotation. So it's like, imagine a brace being able to hold the leg and preventing any kind of rotation. I mean, it's very difficult to get that kind of control of a leg.
Man, interesting. So, switching over to baseball, I know we talked about him last week, but Wade Miley, sure enough, he's got to have that Tommy John surgery. So he's said he's going to go through the surgery. He's going to rehab, 10 to 12 months before kind of deciding whether he's going to continue his career. He's 37. Does that, his age, I hate to say 37's old, but, with
still a baby,
right? Yeah. With that age, with his age and the rehab, with a surgery like that, does age come into play, whether he's going to be able to make a full recovery and be at a major league pitching level, if that kind of makes sense?
Absolutely. I mean, so you are correct. 37 in, physiologic age as a human being is not old. When you're talking about a professional athlete, 37 is old. So I wouldn't be worried about his ability to heal. So I think you can do that surgery, whether it's with a full reconstruction or doing the internal brace technique. Those are both options for that. Either one, yeah. It's the question is when you get him back, are you going to be able to get him back at a level? Because, I mean, there's a natural trail off at that age, right? So, I mean, not even at that age, before that age. I mean, a lot of guys are peaking in their younger, mid-30s even. I mean, it's not that often you see pitchers making a run at 40. I mean, there's not a lot of Nolan Ryans out there. So I would say he'll probably have to take a long look at, like, is it worth to try to get back, and will he get back? So his odds of success are lower than, let's say, a 22-year-old who's working his way up through the minors, who's just kind of coming into his own. So could it be done? Absolutely. Is it going to be a guarantee? Far from it. So I think that's going to be a decision that they're going to have to look at. And if there's other damage in the elbow, luckily UCL injuries are often relatively isolated, so there's not a lot of additional damage. So that's the good news. So I think they'll have to kind of take a look at the whole picture.
I know it probably doesn't matter anymore, but with the Bucks being out of the postseason, Giannis didn't play a single game. Apparently he tried yesterday, went through a couple workouts. but Bucks didn't clear him. So, do you think it was a little bit maybe more severe than what we initially were kind of told with that calf strain?
I think severity, yes. Still, the actual type of injury probably still the same. I mean, it's luckily it wasn't actually a true tendon injury. This was still probably a musculotendinous injury. So, I think at the end of the day, we do see ones that last that long. So it's still not outside the realm of like, oh yeah, that's crazy that he'd miss that much time. I mean, people with a really bad fill in the blank, hamstring, groin, calf, hip flexor. I mean, you can injure those muscles really severely, and they can take, 6 to 8 weeks till people can go. The problem is you try pushing, go back too soon, and it often adds a little bit of fuel back to the fire. So they're trying to get better. They think they can try go. They try go. Bam, it aggravates it, and it's a step backwards. So, I'm sure he wanted to be out there. We all know he's a competitor. And at the end of the day, sometimes you just get out in the court and you try it, and you just don't have it, right? It just isn't there, or it hurts. And then, again, you just don't want to take a big step backwards. So, obviously, I'm sure he wanted to try to get to the next round and then be healthy and make a real push. But it's just, unfortunately, injuries are part of the game. And the good news is, long-term prognosis for this one is good. The bad news is it obviously was just bad timing for this season.
And then Damian Lillard did return to the lineup, but it wasn't, he was like a week ago, he was in a walking boot. They said he had another Achilles or re-aggravated that Achilles injury. Just how risky do you think it was for him to go out there and almost play 40 minutes when just a week ago he was in a walking boot dealing with an Achilles injury?
Yeah, that can be variable too. So I think when they put the boot on, they're just trying to get absolute, maximum healing. So which is basically immobilizing. That's what you're doing. So you put the boot on, you kind of take the Achilles, so you walk without your Achilles. So you're not stressing it at all. And same thing. I think they're probably going through the exact same protocol that Giannis did. That you just want to see how it responds. And clearly his wasn't as severe, and he was able to get back out there and play. But hopefully, again, that bounces back and fully recovers. So it really has to do with kind of the severity of the injury itself. And a lot of times you can get a bit of a guess on MRI. The challenge is, truthfully, most orthopedic surgeons, we don't get a lot of these MRIs to assess. People come in and pull their hamstring. We see these in clinic. We don't send them for an MRI. Pro athletes get that. These guys get MRIs if they sneeze too hard, right? So yeah. It's one of those things. They get MRIs of everything. So it really probably gives a lot of insight, but it's not only how bad it is, it's just how the body heals and responds. Or if they've had, repeat injuries, and so there's maybe a little bit extra scar tissue in that area that takes longer to bounce back. So it's just, there's so much variability. It's hard to predict. It really is. And so, in a lot of times when you're dealing with these teams, the coaching staff will come to you and say, look, when do we think we're going to get this athlete back? And it is a guessing game. So, you try to do your best to give an accurate prediction, but at the end of the day, there's the severity of the injury, and really how the athlete's bodies respond. And those are two variables you can't always predict.
Last question for you, going to the Timberwolves. It's not a player, but it's a coach, Chris Finch, with that collision on the sidelines, actually ruptured his patellar tendon. So he had surgery the other day and such. But, that sounds painful to rupture your patellar tendon in your knee.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's one of those, I'm sure it hurt for a split second, but it's kind of like your Achilles. It pops, and then people are like, "Oh, it doesn't hurt that bad." No, the problem is you'll never walk in if you don't get it repaired. So that's a must surgery. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm sure the impact. It was. I've watched that video a couple times. It's a weird way for him to do that. Usually, it's when people fall and the knee buckles underneath them. His was almost more of like a direct impact. It was a weird way to do it. But either way, he'll be on crutches. The question is, and I don't know if they really announced if he may miss a game or two. Or maybe he'll be kind of working remotely, but he'll certainly have a leg brace on and crutches for a while. But it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back from that. It's going to be an exciting series. I was able to make it to game 2. I took my daughter to that game. It was an awesome atmosphere, and they're playing really well. Ant is just such a fun player to watch right now. And it's going to be, Denver's going to be tough, but I think if we can somehow make it through here, the T-Wolves could surprise some people.
Anthony Edwards, coming out party for him in this playoffs, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, yeah, he's been such an exciting player to watch. He is so explosive. Every player has their different talents. Giannis is so long and can extend plays, but what Ant can do, just how explosive. I mean, he goes from feet on the ground to 10 feet in the air in a split second. I mean, it is unreal what he can do. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Special player, no doubt about it. We're rooting for you. Now that our Bucks are out, we're rooting for you. So
deal.
All right. Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Dude, always appreciate it every Friday morning with you. Enjoy the weekend, and let's catch up again soon, okay?
Absolutely. Take care.
You got it. Dr. Austin Crowe again. Awesome stuff here. Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.